Harley Davidson just embarrassed Trump in front of the entire country, and he completely lost it. One of America's most iconic brands, fed up with threats and tariffs, stood up to the president and said exactly what no other company dared. This wasn't just a policy fight, it was a public showdown, and Harley wiped the floor with him. What's happening? It was supposed to be another flag-waving, made-for-television rally, nothing more than a routine stump speech about jobs, steel, and the greatness of American manufacturing. But then, in front of a roaring crowd in Ohio, President Donald Trump did something no one expected. They're leaving. After everything we did, they're taking the jobs out of this country, he barked from the podium. Harley Davidson is turning their back on America. That moment hit like a hammer. The audience erupted. Some booing Harley, others shifting uncomfortably. One of the most iconic American brands, a symbol of rebellion and freedom, was now being painted as a corporate traitor. And the person leveling the accusation wasn't a journalist or an activist. It was the President of the United States. This wasn't a press release. This wasn't a quiet negotiation behind closed doors. This was public, loud, and fully intentional. The President of the United States had just ignited a political firestorm on national television by accusing a legacy American company of betraying its workers. But the real shock wasn't just in what Trump said, it was in what came next. More on that in a moment. Hit subscribe to keep following the story. The 200% Tariff Ultimatum. A few days later, the tension exploded again. During a press event on the White House lawn, President Trump doubled down. If Harley moves production overseas, he said, staring straight into the camera, they're going to face a 200% tariff. 200%! A tariff that steep was not just unusual, it was unheard of in modern American economic history. The threat was clear. If Harley dared shift manufacturing outside of U.S. borders, the administration would make sure their bikes couldn't be sold on American soil without being priced into oblivion. And yet, Trump's message wasn't just about numbers, it was about allegiance. You build in America, or you don't sell to Americans, he said. Critics immediately warned about government overreach. Business leaders panicked. Investors blinked. Even some Republican lawmakers shifted uneasily in their seats. But none of that mattered. Trump had set his sights on Harley Davidson and he wasn't letting go. The company had two options, fold or fight. And Harley's next move shocked everyone. Harley fires back with relocation plans. Instead of backing down, Harley Davidson made their answer crystal clear. In a carefully worded statement released just days after Trump's tariff threat, the company confirmed what had already been brewing internally for months. They were going to move a portion of their production to Mexico and Europe. The reason wasn't political, they insisted. It was economic. Harley wasn't chasing profits. It was running from disaster. Since the initial round of tariffs in 2018, the cost of raw materials, especially steel and aluminum, had soared. The European Union had retaliated with their own 25% tariff on American-made motorcycles, adding over $2,000 to the cost of every bike Harley shipped overseas. It was unsustainable. Either Harley moved some operations abroad to avoid those retaliatory tariffs, or it risked pricing itself out of Europe completely. And with U.S. sales already falling year over year, the international market was not optional. It was essential, but Trump didn't care. He saw only one thing, a company abandoning America. He accused Harley of using tariffs as an excuse, of chasing cheap labor, of selling out. And yet inside Harley's boardroom, the decision had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with survival. This wasn't a betrayal. This was a last-ditch effort to stay alive in a global economy now booby-trapped with political landmines. "We're not trying to pick a fight," said one Harley executive off the record. "We're trying not to die." Still, the company's carefully measured explanation was drowned out by the roar of online rage. Because Trump wasn't done, and the next move would come in 180 characters or less, social media meltdown. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Hashtags trended, memes flew. Supporters of the president called for a boycott. News networks interrupted coverage to report the tweet as breaking news. For Harley, this was no longer just a corporate risk, it was an existential crisis. The company had survived recessions, wars, and foreign competition, but it had never gone to war with a sitting president, and it had never faced the wrath of a digital mob fired up by the most powerful man in the world. The impact was immediate. Dealers reported cancellations. Shareholders panicked. The press circled like sharks. The president had used Twitter not as a communications tool, but as a weapon, publicly shaming a private company and weaponizing his political base to pressure it into submission. Harley tried to respond, issuing another statement clarifying that its move was a reaction to European tariffs, not an act of corporate betrayal. But by then, the narrative had already been written, retweeted, and broadcasted to millions. Trump's followers saw Harley as the villain, and Harley's riders, longtime loyalists, veterans, mechanics, and freedom-loving bikers, were suddenly split in two. One tweet had flipped the story from economic policy to cultural war. When loyalty turns to boycott, it started with shock. Then came the anger, and finally something no one at Harley-Davidson ever expected: boycott. When Donald Trump unleashed his fury on Harley for moving production overseas, his most loyal followers listened. Many of them weren't just fans of the president, they were the very riders who had built Harley into a cultural institution. They wore the leather. They flew the flags. They believed in Made in America. But now they believed they'd been betrayed. This wasn't just a political fallout, it was cultural mutiny. For decades, Harley had carefully cultivated an image of American grit and rebellion. But now, those same values were being weaponized against it. Riders didn't see this as a business decision. They saw it as a moral one. And to them, Harley had chosen profit over patriotism. They burned merch, covered tattoos. Some even posted videos trading in their Harleys for Indian bikes. The outrage was loud, raw, and relentless. Harley's leadership was blindsided. Public relations scrambled to issue statements emphasizing the move was about survival, not greed. But the message couldn't keep up with the backlash. Because the truth was clear to Harley's core audience, they didn't want excuses. They wanted loyalty. And the second they felt Harley had turned its back on them, they didn't hesitate to return the favor. And just when Harley thought it couldn't get worse, the pain hit their front lines. Harley dealers hit ground zero. In Louisiana, a dealership that had served the same community for over 3 decades reported 0 weekend sales for the first time in 15 years. In California, longtime customers canceled service appointments and asked for refunds on custom orders. The anger that started online was now walking through the doors of America's Harley dealerships and walking right back out. Harley dealerships had always been more than just retail centers. They were community hubs. They hosted biker meetups, barbecues, charity rides, and veterans events. These weren't just customers, they were family. But that family was now turning away, and the economic fallout was immediate. Inventory started to pile up. Salespeople who once worked on commission-based confidence were now chasing cold leads and issuing steep discounts just to keep the lights on. Many dealerships, still recovering from the pandemic-era slowdowns, were already working with thin margins. Now, with Trump's base leading the boycott and Harley under siege, dealers found themselves stuck in the middle. Loyal to the brand, but loyal to their towns too. And those towns were furious. Local repair shops that depended on Harley traffic saw revenues plummet. Small businesses around the dealerships, coffee shops, gas stations, roadside diners noticed fewer bikers, fewer customers, fewer tips. The financial impact wasn't just corporate, it was personal. And as some dealers quietly considered switching brands or closing altogether, Harley's crisis began to snowball. Because in a world where image is everything and loyalty is currency, Harley's once unshakable base was dissolving in real time. But while Harley's dealers were bleeding, someone else was quietly sharpening their knives. Indian Motorcycles makes its move. While Harley-Davidson found itself in the middle of a political inferno, Indian Motorcycles saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and seized it. Indian, Harley's fiercest American rival, had been gaining slow and steady traction for years. But now, with Harley under attack from both its customer base and the president himself, Indian hit the gas. Their message was simple, bold, and sharp as steel. We never left America. We never turned our backs. We're still the real thing. Billboards began popping up along highways near Harley dealerships. Still made here, still proud, Indian Motorcycles. Their marketing team knew exactly what to say and exactly when to say it. And the results? Immediate. Dealerships reported a spike in foot traffic. Online search interest for Indian motorcycles more than doubled within a week of Trump's Harley tirade. New buyers, many of them former Harley loyalists, started placing orders. And Indian wasn't just talking about loyalty, they were backing it up with innovation. Their bikes were lighter, more tech-savvy, more affordable for younger riders. And let's not forget who owns Indian: Polaris, a powerful American manufacturer with deep pockets, a clean public image, and none of Harley's political baggage. To riders disillusioned by Harley's choices, Indian didn't just look like an alternative, it looked like an evolution. This wasn't just market competition anymore, this was battlefield strategy. And Indian was making their move with precision. But while Indian was winning hearts at home, Harley was about to take a brutal hit from across the ocean. The European Union retaliates, and Harley pays. When Donald Trump launched his trade war, it wasn't just aimed at China, it wasn't just for show. The European Union was paying attention, and when they responded, they made sure Harley Davidson felt it first. In retaliation to the United States steel and aluminum tariffs, the EU imposed a devastating 25% tariff on American motorcycles. The target was obvious: Harley Davidson, a cultural icon, a symbol of American manufacturing, a brand with global presence and deep economic roots. Overnight, the cost of every Harley Davidson shipped to Europe jumped by over $2,200. For a company already struggling with falling U.S. sales and political backlash at home, this was a catastrophe. Harley had been depending on international growth to offset losses, and suddenly that growth collapsed. European distributors balked. Dealers canceled bulk orders. Customers across Germany, France, Italy, and Spain backed out of purchases they'd been saving up for. Some turned to European brands like BMW or Ducati, while others opted for Japanese alternatives that weren't affected by the tariffs. Faced with a crumbling international market, Harley made the call that set everything on fire: shift production overseas. They announced new overseas assembly plans, specifically in Thailand and other lower-cost manufacturing hubs, to bypass the EU tariffs. The logic was clear. They had no choice. But to Donald Trump, it was treason. And to Harley's American riders, it was betrayal. That move didn't just trigger Trump's Twitter war, it detonated it. And while Harley scrambled to stay afloat in the international waters, it was being pummeled at home. The company had tried to play both sides. Now both sides were hitting back. But what happened inside those factories? That's where the real rebellion was brewing. The factory floor revolts. It didn't start with shouting. It started with silence. A long, bitter silence that filled the Harley Davidson assembly line in Milwaukee. Workers went about their tasks, bolting frames, testing engines, welding steel, but the energy was gone. And then slowly it started to boil over. First came the group meetings, then the petitions, then the refusals to work overtime, then the walkouts. Harley's factory workers weren't just upset, they were furious. On one side was their employer making cold, calculated business decisions to preserve profits in a global economy. On the other side was the President of the United States, accusing their company of betrayal. The men and women who made the motorcycles, who had oil under their nails and Harley patches on their backs, who had stayed loyal when other companies outsourced years ago. They weren't angry about foreign competition, they were angry about feeling disposable. Many had worked at Harley for over 20 years. They had seen friends laid off, plants closed, benefits slashed, and now they were being told they might have to train replacements in another country. Harley's proud craftsmanship was showing cracks, not because the workers lacked skill, but because they had lost faith. This wasn't just a labor issue anymore. It was a cultural fracture, a growing divide between the people who built the bikes and the people who decided where they would be built. And while Harley's leadership tried to spin it as strategic repositioning, the factory floor called it what it was: betrayal. But the betrayal wasn't just inside the factory, it was about to hit the dealership network that built Harley's empire from the ground up. The legacy dealer that walked away. 70 years. That's how long Thompson HarleyDavidson had been in business in northern Illinois. 3 generations, thousands of bikes sold, countless riders who called the shop their second home. But this year, the unthinkable happened. They tore down the Harley sign, and in its place, Indian motorcycles. The announcement sent shockwaves through the community. The Thompsons had been synonymous with Harley since the 1950s. Photos of veterans buying their first bikes lined the walls. The showroom floor was once packed on weekends with leather jackets and chrome. So why walk away? The answer was brutal. "We don't recognize the brand anymore," said Mark Thompson, the current owner and grandson of the founder. "This company used to be about loyalty, about freedom. Now it's about excuses." He cited dropping foot traffic, shrinking margins, and increasingly hostile customer feedback. "We had riders come in and say, 'If Harley won't stay loyal to America, why should I stay loyal to Harley?' We lost business overnight." Switching to Indian wasn't just a financial decision, it was a statement. "They're investing in us," Thompson said. "They're building bikes here, supporting local shops, listening to riders." Harley stopped listening. The switch drew national media attention. Other dealers quietly reached out to ask how the process worked. Some even hinted they were considering similar moves. Harley's leadership scrambled to contain the damage, issuing a statement that every dealership is part of our extended family. But for the Thompsons, that family had already broken apart. This was no longer just a market share issue. It was a generational fracture, a line in the sand. If even Harley's most loyal dealers were walking away, what happens when that roar becomes a whisper? When presidents target companies. It used to be unthinkable, an American president publicly declaring war on an American company. But when Donald Trump turned his rage on Harley-Davidson, everything changed. What had once been a symbolic relationship between politics and private enterprise shattered under the weight of one man's fury. Trump didn't just criticize the company, he vowed retribution. He used the full force of the presidential pulpit to shame, punish, and humiliate an American icon. And suddenly, every CEO in America was watching. For decades, American companies operated under the assumption that as long as they stayed profitable and legal, they could make whatever strategic decisions they needed, relocate factories, enter foreign markets, trim costs. But Trump upended that equation. Now, loyalty wasn't just an unspoken value, it was a demand. Companies were expected to put patriotism above profit, and if they didn't, there would be consequences. No press conference, no closed-door meeting, just a tweet, a crowd, and a threat. The message was simple. You either align with the president's vision or prepare to be dismantled in public. The era of corporate independence was suddenly on trial. Trump's promise to impose a 200% tariff on Harley-Davidson's products wasn't just policy, it was personal. He accused the company of betrayal. He called on his base to boycott their motorcycles. He even encouraged riders to switch to competitors. For a sitting president to weaponize his popularity against a private corporation was unprecedented, and it set a terrifying new standard. Suddenly, doing business wasn't just about market trends, it was about managing political landmines. Companies realized that one wrong move, one decision that clashed with a president's agenda, could mean financial ruin, public humiliation, and political retaliation. Trump's attack on Harley created a precedent. Presidents could now dictate industrial decisions through fear, shame, and threat. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. And the moment that made it all explode, it wasn't a press conference, it was a tweet. The tweet heard round the world. It was less than 280 characters, but the damage was incalculable. Trump took to Twitter and lit the fuse. "I fought hard for Harley-Davidson and they abandoned us. Watch, they will be taxed like never before." Those words weren't just a threat, they were a message to the world. What followed was nothing short of a corporate meltdown. Harley-Davidson's stock wavered. Dealerships were flooded with angry calls. Longtime customers demanded refunds or pledged to never ride a Harley again. And other CEOs? They went silent. No public statements, no interviews, just closed-door meetings with legal teams trying to understand how to survive this new political reality. In a single post, the president had turned the full force of his following against a century-old American brand. The digital mob took over from there. Boycotts, threats, protests at dealerships. Harley Davidson, the rebel brand, was now being treated like a traitor. It wasn't just Trump's supporters who were watching, so were world leaders, investors, and economic strategists. The market realized that in this era, a single tweet could tank stock, erase brand loyalty, and unravel decades of goodwill. The stability of American enterprise wasn't built on sound economics anymore. It was being tested by viral politics. For Harley Davidson, there would be no recovering that innocence. The brand that once roared with American pride now echoed with uncertainty. But it wasn't just the streets and showrooms feeling the shock. Wall Street heard it too, and it hit them where it hurts most, the stock ticker. The Wall Street fallout. Trump's tweet hadn't just stirred outrage in dealerships and biker bars, it sent tremors through boardrooms and hedge funds. The message was clear. Harley Davidson was no longer a safe bet. It was a political flashpoint, a corporate liability. And for investors, risk is the enemy. Within hours of the president's online tirade, Harley's stock slipped nearly 6%. Over the next week, it continued to slide, shedding billions in market cap. Major investment firms slashed their outlooks. One analyst at Goldman Sachs downgraded Harley to underperform, calling it a brand caught between cultures, generations, and geopolitical landmines. Institutional investors, the quiet giants who manage pensions, hedge funds, and retirement portfolios, started pulling out. Shareholder meetings turned tense. Behind closed doors, board members grilled executives because no one had ever seen a president actively dismantle a company's brand equity in real time. To outside observers, it was a masterclass in value destruction. Decades of brand loyalty, cultural cachet, and Wall Street credibility, undone in a few tweets and a trade war. And as Harley tried to assure shareholders that it was navigating the storm, the numbers told another story. Sales were soft, market share was shrinking, dealer satisfaction was dropping, and the international growth strategy Harley had bet its future on, now tangled in tariffs, boycotts, and broken trust. At corporate HQ, confidence was evaporating. Executives who once presented bold roadmaps now tiptoed through earnings calls. Staffers whispered about internal audits, emergency meetings, even leadership shakeups. The market had made up its mind. Harley wasn't in control anymore. And in the cold logic of capitalism, when trust disappears, money follows. And if that wasn't enough, Harley and every other American company was now staring down a darker future. Because the question wasn't just how to fix this, the question was, could they survive the new rules of global manufacturing? Manufacturing in the age of war. Harley versus Trump wasn't just a scandal, it was a warning shot. A preview of what happens when politics overtakes production, when nationalism collides with economic survival. Harley Davidson was the first high-profile casualty of this new war, but it will not be the last. Because here's the hard truth, American manufacturing is being split in two. On one side, you have the patriotic pressure to keep it in America. On the other, the unforgiving math of global supply chains. Raw materials, labor, shipping, every cost is cheaper elsewhere. But now companies can't just quietly offshore production. Every decision is political. Every move invites scrutiny. CEOs have to choose, protect their profit margins or protect their public image. Either way, someone pays. This is the new battlefield. Harley's attempt to balance the scales failed spectacularly. And the playbook most companies used, silence, subtlety, low visibility, no longer works. In this new age, your brand can be dragged into a political war overnight. Even sectors outside of motorcycles are feeling it. Automakers, tech firms, steel manufacturers, every industry that depends on global inputs is being squeezed. And Trump's war on Harley made something clear. Made in America isn't a slogan anymore. It's a loyalty test. But the economics haven't changed. American manufacturing is still expensive. And if politics demand companies stay, but the market demands they go, we're headed for an industrial identity crisis. This isn't just about Harley, it's about the future of capitalism in a divided nation. Can profit and patriotism coexist? Can companies survive without choosing a side? Or is this the new reality where every business decision is a declaration of allegiance? The fallout from Harley's clash with Trump is still unfolding, but one thing is certain: the age of neutral business is over. And for corporate America, the road ahead is anything but smooth. What do you think? Did Harley stand up for survival or sell out? And was Trump protecting jobs or crossing a line? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if this made you think, and subscribe for more stories they don't want you to hear. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.